But first, renewed fighting in northern Ethiopia intensified further on Thursday. Rebels from Tigray say that Eritrean fighters have joined federal troops in offensives in the northwest of the region. Several fronts have opened up since a ceasefire brought in March broke down on August 24th, ending hopes that a fragile push for peace talks might win out. Civil war first erupted in the country in late 2020, and since then thousands have been killed and millions displaced. For more on this, I'm joined now by William Davison from the International Crisis Group. William, thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, this has all moved very quickly. What can you tell us about where the renewed fighting stands at the moment? Is it a repeat of the first phase of those years of conflict that we saw since 2020?
Well, worryingly, it's beginning to look very much like that's a possibility. The fighting first started in the sort of border of the north of Amhara region to the south of Tigray. We then saw the Federal Air Force bomb targets, civilian targets, according to the Tigray authorities in Mekelle, the capital. And now, as you reported, we've had the very worrying prospect of the return of Eritrea's military into the conflict from the north. And that could signal a renewed attempt by the federal government, Eritrea, and partners to take control of Tigray and push the TPLF government from power, as they did initially in November 2020. So the fighting is spreading, and it could well do so more, and it's all incredibly worrying.
Now, during the first phase, the government was repeatedly accused of blocking aid through to Tigray. We've seen this week that it was actually the government also accusing the TPLF of pushing the people of Tigray into starvation. So a tit for tat there. But either way, do you think that there's any chance that this renewed fighting might be at all easier on the civilian populations stuck in the middle, waiting for humanitarian aid to get through?
Well, first of all, we've had all sorts of allegations and propaganda during this conflict. I think some of those allegations amount to that. And with regards to the recent restrictions, since the Tigray authorities, TPLF, took back power in Mekelle last June, there's actually been a renewed federal blockade on the region, trade, aid, public services. We have seen an increase in aid during the truce this year, but other components of the blockade still in place. The danger now, of course, is that with renewed conflict, it makes it more difficult for humanitarians to operate, and it's likely to strengthen the hand of those in the federal government arguing for restrictions on Tigray. So really we see nothing but a likelihood of an exacerbation of an already very devastating situation for civilians in Tigray and those outside of Tigray, in Amhara and Afar regions affected by this conflict. And the longer the fighting goes on, the worse that's going to get. And until there is a renewed commitment to a truce, it's going to be very hard to get a sustained improvement to the humanitarian operation.
And are there any hopes for those peace talks? Are they dead? And why did they break down in the first place?
Similarly to the humanitarian situation, there's no doubt that the resumption of conflict and everything that comes with it, in terms of the renewed bad blood, that takes us further away, obviously, from a truce, from the necessary concessions needed to start peace talks, which haven't actually occurred despite the truce this year, and therefore no real attempt or prospect of actually addressing the political disagreements at the heart of this conflict. Now, the parties failed to agree on whether the African Union or Kenya's government would mediate. Tigray's government demanded that the federal government remove the blockade before any talks, which the federal government failed to do. So there's been all sorts of disagreements within bigger disagreements that meant that peace talks have not occurred. And unless the parties stop fighting, de-escalate, recommit to a truce, and reconsider their approach to the talks, then it's going to be very hard to make progress, even if we manage to stop the momentum towards conflict. And I think the international actors, the US, the African Union, Kenya's government, the United Nations, the EU, have a massive role to play in trying to get the parties not just to stop fighting, but to take a more constructive approach to the peace process.
Thank you very much. William Davison there from the Crisis Group, talking us through the renewed fighting in Ethiopia.